Hey everyone, Corey from Aquarium Co-op with Joel of Corvus Oskin here for the Real Fish Talk. We're running a little late. Traffic was, as I'm told, ridiculous.
Abysmal.
You left 3 hours ago? Yeah. So, that's why we're 20 minutes late, because he left at 7 thinking, well, clearly I could make a 10 a.m. start time.
Well, yeah, it's like, oh, I'll get there at, 9:15 maybe?
Mm-hmm.
No.
So, apologize for starting late, but, I could have started the show without you, but that would have been a little awkward.
That would have been weird, because they would come storming in the back like,
and so what do you
what's
think?
happening?
What's the top? Well, maybe you could have chimed in from the road, like
From the
listen
road,
to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Be like,
Pull over every 5
trying to
minutes,
not
leave
crash.
a comment. Yeah.
Yeah.
The show must go on, buddy.
I was trying to avoid the semis today. That was the good. A lot of semis
All right.
moving around.
Well, today we're talking about Unheated Aquariums. I read that from my bed this morning. Someone's like, oh man, you talk about fish that are good for not heated aquariums in your unboxing videos a lot. By the way, new video out, go watch it. After this, of course. And I was like, I do. And they're like, you should do a show on that. And in my mind, I'm going, well, I've probably done that 5 times. But the reality is, I've probably only done it once or twice. And it was like 2 years ago. So that's today. Today we're going to talk about unheated aquariums. I'm like Mr. Unheated Aquarium when it comes to that. Because like my wife's tank, we just put a heater in it 2 days ago. And that tank's been set up for a year.
It's for one entire year with no heater.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
And so people, like, if you watch the videos and stuff, you're going to wait. You had, like, roseline sharks and tetras and angels and corycats and. But the reality is, in our own living spaces at home, we run it relatively warm compared to nature. Like, even if you're like, well, I don't turn the heat on in the winter. It's 60 degrees in my house. That's still pretty warm considering, like, it's just outside. Like...
right. Yeah. I mean, that would be the big thing for me. It's like, if you have it in your living space, I don't know how important a heater would be necessarily. We keep our house at 69. So, I mean, if the ambient temperature was 69, that's actually pretty darn good compared to...
Right. So, in my experience, like, if the ambient temperature is 69, my aquarium during the night will run at about 66. During the day, might even be like 71, all the lights and that kind of stuff. And just to wrap people's brains around this, think about outside of an aquarium. We talk about keeping fish outside during the whole summer. Well, it definitely gets less than 69 degrees in my ponds, for sure. And I can put almost any species out there, barring discus, rams. There's a few I would be like, well, I'm not doing that. But for the most part, we consider that to be absolutely fine. But then when we bring them in, all of a sudden they're like these fragile creatures of like, oh God, if it's below 78 or even 76, we're having a problem. And so yeah, but there are fish I consider to be better suited for cooler aquariums or an unheated aquarium than others. So we already talked about rams and discus. As you mentioned right before we went on the show, like, well, obviously we got to talk about the goldfish.
It's got to come up at some point because that's going to be the first. If we talk about unheated aquariums, that's the first thing that like pops into people's head. Goldfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which obviously they don't have to be heated. They do great. Goldfish. They're limiting. My stance on goldfish, their limiting factor is their size. Like if goldfish existed at 2 inches, they're the perfect fish.
Yeah, pretty much.
Bright orange color. You
Bright
can go
orange
black, white, orange, crazy hardy, will eat anything, sift through sand and gravel for you, eat each other's poop. Like, I'm not sure there's a downside beside the fact they get over a foot, right?
Yeah, other than they get huge. And,
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe they're kind of wasteful, I guess. They do create...
So, I do not think they create waste.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
And here's why. Because they eat their own waste. And... So here's why. I know it's getting off topic of unheated aquariums, but it is unheated related. I view them like worms. Like, if worms are in your garden and let's say you watch the worms make casings and poop all the time, you could say like, man, those things are really dirty. Or you could make a case of like, But do you see how much they process through? Like, that's actually improving the environment. And I think the same thing of a goldfish in an aquarium. Because they're combing the bottom all the time, they'll eat anything. They'll even redigest their own poop over and over again. I don't think they make a ton of waste. I think it just always looks like they're pooping. And my analogy on past live streams has been, you might think your maid is dirty because she's always cleaning. But the reality is, like, that doesn't make her any more clean or dirty. It depends on, like, well, how often does she wash her hands? And your house is cleaner for it, you know?
Right.
So that's the thing. You know, I kind of look at goldfish the same way.
But maybe she's a huge slob, so she's
Yeah,
constantly...
she could be. You know, I don't have a maid or anything like that, but I'm just, that's the analogy.
I think that's almost the concern that most people have in relation to goldfish, is that their relationship with other fish in, you know, within the aquarium. You know what I mean? So, like, if you had a bunch of goldfish and a bunch of guppies or something, like, the guppies might be negatively affected.
Possibly.
By, you know...
If you take away the fact that the guppies might get swallowed, I'm not sure
Right,
it's a
yeah,
bad... Yeah, we're going to take that
Yeah.
out of the equation. But I'm not sure it's a bad thing to have goldfish in there. Because, like, with my big puffer, like my blue puffer, I ran goldfish for a while because he'd go to the bathroom, a lot of waste. Goldfish would come in, chow that down, and grind it up again a couple more times. And that was way better for the aquarium. The problem I did have with it was that the goldfish would then be like, you know, they kind of mouth everything, so they'd mouth the puffer, and the puffer would be like, I don't like being mouthed.
Yeah, I don't think puffers like that.
They don't. They
Puffers
don't
don't
that.
like being...
They don't like anything.
They don't like being poked.
It's the same
You know
reason
what I
they
mean?
hate clown loaches. They hate pretty much everything. So
It's like they're not entirely enjoyed being poked, because puffers know. Well, it's like if you walked up on a guy who had just like a gun, you know, or just a gun in his hand,
yeah,
you know, and you're
it's
like,
like poking the bear.
"Hey, buddy,
Yeah.
hey," and he's like, "Well, I got this thing. Get out of here," you know. That's kind of like how puffers are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I could just bite you in half real quick. You know, I'm fully loaded, ready to go. You know.
So this question's come up a couple of times, and I think you can chime in on it. Can shrimp be kept without a heater?
Yes, but you have to take into consideration the type of shrimp
Okay.
that that you're considering to keep without heater. A lot of the sort of more robust cherry shrimp you can definitely keep without a heater, because they can go all the way down to...
I've done it.
I mean,
I've overwintered them here.
I don't want to like misquote myself and say like they can go down to 42 degrees,
I'll
and
say
somebody's
that
like, "Well, I froze mine."
I
No.
can say my practical advice. I've overwintered them outside, and they had 2 inches of ice over the pond.
Yeah.
Given that's only one, I've done that in 2 different ponds. It's a very small sample size,
Right.
And I don't live in Wisconsin or anything like that. But I can at least go, this is my personal experience, so that way you don't look as crazy when you say they can go down to 40.
Well, you know,
in theory,
with inverts, most of them can handle, you know, sort of the extremophile temperatures. In a way, they're sort of able to do that kind of stuff. And I mean, I wouldn't recommend, you know, reef shrimp getting super cold.
That is
but
a very
I've had that
good
happen.
distinction.
I've had the saltwater tank get down to like 38 degrees.
You savage.
It was sucked. It was the worst.
It was sucked.
I mean, it was like
That's how bad it was. Grammar screwed up and everything.
this
It was
coral
sucked.
is $900. I'm just gonna
You
go
mean was?
put this in the garbage,
Yeah.
you know, because I was like,
That's
I
no
mean, I
good.
could have saved the rock, but it was like,
Yeah.
But it, you know, from a personal experience, I've had that happen, and the inverts survived, you know, which is weird, in that situation. So I wouldn't necessarily like make that as a recommendation, but a lot of shrimp can handle cold temperature. You know, here's a shrimp that doesn't like it. So Vicky has some vampire shrimp, and her heater was kaputs. So that tank was down to about 59, 58 degrees, somewhere in there. It was like, oh, you know, and we've got the cribs in there, so we don't want them getting cold.
Yeah.
They didn't seem bothered by it at all.
Yeah,
They
a
were
lot
like-
of a lot of African cichlids, which I consider
they
cribs
were
or
all
West
swimming around
African.
like, hey buddy, it's kind of
Yeah.
cold in here, but
yeah.
you got some snacks, you know. But the vampire shrimp was definitely affected by it, though pulled through. So he's doing fine now that he's back up to, we've got him at about 76 degrees, and he's moving around, he's eating again. And so that's all.
I wonder if that's from the region. Like, I know African cichlids do okay, cooler. I'm not going to say cold, but cooler.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if it's like, because the vampire shrimp, aren't they from Africa, right? I think they're an African blue wood shrimp, I think.
Yes.
So maybe it's a region thing. Because I know, I would highly suspect, I have not tried to freeze these yet, but the cardinal shrimp from Sulawesi, they usually like to be higher.
From the Sulawesi.
Yeah, they like to be much higher in temperature, so I'd be very afraid to take them cooler when I can.
Right.
I pretty much can't sustain them long term, even warm. So
When you start to think of that strip in Africa where like the Congo is and stuff like that, I mean, that's all hitting the equator, which,
yeah,
I think if you just look regionally where certain things are, if it's hitting the equator where it's from and where it's kind of evolved, they're going to be much more sensitive to wild temperature swings. Whereas things that come from further away, if you got things like, for instance, from Chile, in Chile, it's like it's hot during the summer, it's cold during the winter. So if you were to be getting things from that area,
they're already used to seasons.
they're used to a whole seasonal swing, and they're more adapted to that. So if there was an easy way to go like, can it handle a temperature? That's kind of how I would look at it. It's like, where does
That'd
this
be the first starting point
originate?
for sure,
That would
yeah.
be that start off point. Yeah.
So Audrey Fisher asks, considering schooling fish in a 40-gallon with fancy goldfish, would zebra danios or rummy nose tetras be better? The temp's 72 to 75. Would they eat neons? My wife loves to tell a story about how we watched goldfish eat 100 neon tetras when I was newer to the hobby. So I can say, in my experience, goldfish will eat anything that fits in their mouth they can catch.
Yes.
But
Oftentimes not even non-edible things.
oh yeah, rocks, doesn't matter. Like that rock didn't move, I caught it. Yeah. Yeah.
Victory.
But I do believe in adding some spice to the life of fish. So that sounds weird, but like in that aquarium, I don't think zebra danios or rummy nose tetras are ideal, either of them. Like rummy nose tetras, they'll handle the temperature, they'll be okay, and they can be kept with goldfish. Zebra danios, they're really going to be up there at feeding time. They can get a little nippy on them if they want to. Whereas I feel like a white cloud, a much better pairing. Quick, cheap, shoaling fish, handles wicked cold temperatures if it wanted to. Yeah, because I do like when the goldfish chase them, they're getting exercise, they're staying active, they're working through that food. All those types of things where, if you just got one sitting on the bottom, a lot of times the best way to start recovering them is putting some tank mates. Like, I'm going to get you. And they just do that all day long. And pretty soon they're like, I'm going poop now.
Yeah.
Like, hey, all that running did some good.
Got to do a little jogging.
Yeah.
A little jogging.
So I like white clouds quite a bit. I do know people that have done rummy nose with their goldfish, but do know that it can eat one, like.
Yeah, they definitely can.
And it's not so much during the day, by the way. It's at night when tetras are like, the lights are out. Let's school up. And goldfish is like,
Yeah, come by and it's feeding time.
I hope that turns into a meme, by the way. I watched myself in the camera do it, and I was like, oh, man.
Tis goldfish feeding time.
Goldfish curries on the attack.
But yeah, I think that you mentioned the white cloud mountain minnows. Those are my number one go-to fish as far as
they're pretty much the best fish in the world, regardless of temperature.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of people go, oh, well, they're really common. Oh, they're not that great. Well, there's a lot of color variations out there now. There's a lot of good color variations out there. At one point, my favorite school that I ever had was like 200 of the gold.
Yeah.
White cloud mountain minnows.
I think they're a rad pond fish.
They were awesome. And one of the really cool things about them is that maybe you're a little bored by them. Then that means it's time to start breeding them. That's pretty much the deal.
Yeah.
So once you start getting into the breeding behaviors and all that kind of stuff, they're a really fun schooling fish. And can just handle just pretty much any water temperature you throw at them. I mean, you can't boil them,
You could. I don't recommend it. They might not be aquarium fish much longer. They actually don't like hot temperatures. So like 80, 82, white clouds start contracting velvet and more diseases way more frequently. They don't die. They just like become way more susceptible.
Yeah.
So, Michael Sarr, this is a question for you because I've never used one. he needs the temps less than 80, but in the summer his house is like 90. Advice on buying a chiller. He doesn't want to buy it twice. So do you have like some simple advice, like buy a ridiculously big one, bro? Or like,
yes.
Okay.
This with the chiller. So the easy way for regular people to figure out like how am I going to size my chiller and stuff like that, it is the same kind of situation as when you go, oh, I'm going to buy an air conditioning unit for my house. Right? And you go, well, I've got just to throw numbers out there, you're like, I've got a 3,000 square foot house. Dang. And you buy a tiny little window AC unit. Yeah. Right? And then that thing is running.
Never turns off.
All the time. Never turns off. And then it's broken in a year. You know, or it's at least depleted in a year. Yeah. We could go into how chillers and air conditioners work, but let's not. But then they go, oh, well, this is like a terrible product. Look, it just like broke and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you have the undersized unit for how much you're trying to do. So one of the things we need to know is the size of the tank, but the easy advice.
Do you have a brand or
simple advice? Well, there isn't really like a necessary brand out there that's like, this is the far and away best
figure out the one you need, buy one size up.
Yeah, that's realistically what you come down to, is that like you're looking, so they're rated by horsepower, right? So you go half a horsepower, quarter horsepower, 1 horsepower. And so what you're looking for is you really want to get an oversized one, so it's not running at, excessively. You want to make sure that you get the oversized one. And then the other side to that is that, remember, it's going to kick heat off of it. So if you did get an undersized one, now your house might be, 90 degrees.
And that room, too.
And it's running.
You closed a door?
All the time. Yeah. And now it might be 90 degrees in there, but now with the chiller running in there, the air temp would actually be like 98 or something, or 100.
Right.
And now it's working even harder to try and cool.
Well, and this ties in for an unheated aquarium. Like, let's say you have all these cool water fish and they're overheating. You might need a chiller. And then my first go-to is always, what temperature is your actual water? Like, figure that out first. And then, like the Zoomed, little fan blowy dealy bob, you just hang on the tank. That will lower the water temp. In my store, where it gets hot and I don't have AC or anything like that during the middle of summer, if it's like 100 degrees out and my tanks are at 80, let's say, and it's a 40 breeder, that little fan drops the temperature between 8 and 9 degrees.
Yeah.
So, it could be one of those things where you might have 90 degrees in the room, your tank's actually 82, you put that thing on there for $40, and now you're sitting at 74, maybe you're golden. We don't know more specifics than that, but...
Right. Yeah, and that's really the cheap way to do it. Like, let's say you're trying to cool your aquarium down. Some simple clamp fans that you can get at, any store that has like household.
I've done that
stuff.
too. I do like the small footprint of the Zoomed one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They have a Zoomed one.
It's like a suction cup on the side with this little. What I really like about it is like the fan is designed to kind of go over the lip, and then you can move the little thing. But it is $40, and like your average house fan, not house fan, but like clippy fan off of Amazon's like $20. So you are paying more, but like in my store, because all my tanks are really close,
right?
I either gonna have this really dumb looking fan on the top of the front of the thing, and no one could buy any fish, and you can't really see them.
Right. Well, I mean, so via the aesthetic, and all that, it definitely is worth. Hey, spend the extra money. But if you're in that like sort of that range of like, hey, I just need a quick, cheap fix.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of those clamp fans actually works pretty well.
I mean, you can use any fan. You can just be like, check out this giant box fan.
Yeah, you could throw a
10-gallon aquarium. It's
you could throw a giant box fan over it. That'd be pretty cool.
It's a little bit. So one of the other fish I want to talk about was the paradise fish, because I feel like they don't get enough exposure in the hobby.
I'm excited.
You're excited?
Yeah.
Okay. I was not aware I was going to excite you with the paradise fish. But I've been bringing them in. Robert's been selling them in the store, and people have been digging on them, and they're relatively easy to breed. But my comment is always, these things are like the best cool water fish. Like, that's why they were the first tropical fish to like come into the country in milk carton crate thingies, way back in the day, because they could withstand a beating and didn't have to be heated. And they're like that goldfish of like, oh, they seem to tolerate poor conditions and not thrive, but like, man, do way better than any other fish in a poor conditioned environment.
Right.
So
Well, they are. I think aren't they? They're like a distant cousin of betas, right?
yeah, they are an anabantoid. I don't know.
And they have a labyrinth gill, so
Right.
they can
Yeah.
breathe air or
But
water.
I can't be like, it's Tina's sister that gave
Right.
birth to,
Yeah.
to paradise
My
fish.
favorite thing about paradise fish, not only them being super attractive, because you get a good looking paradise fish. It's about as many color.
Oh yeah.
The colors.
I lend
you can't
myself to the albino ones.
You can't necessarily find that coloring anywhere else. But the albino ones are great too. I mean,
because the color is so good on the albino, you're just like, dang, that thing's on fire.
Yeah. The coloring for sure. The big selling point in paradise fish for me is their personality. They almost always have, well, what we perceive as a personality. They have a really cool personality as far as like, they come up to the glass whenever you're around. They kind of know you're the keeper. It's like, hey, there's the boss. What's up? That's what I always liked about them. I had one for a long time that sadly died, and then I didn't want to get another one because it was like, respect.
Do you get
respect?
Do you get the same longevity out of paradise fish as you do a betta, like 5-7 years on the
Yeah,
the
I think
long
I had one. I had one for about 3 years, but I don't know how old it was when I
Sure.
got him. You know, so it was like, maybe he was already 2 or 3 years old when I got him, and he just got old and died. But yeah, you definitely get a lot of longevity out of them. And the upside, the upside way that I look at it is with the, not only do they have that longevity, but they also have that kind of real personality that goes along with them. So you really kind of have, as a person, you definitely get a chance to bond with them a little bit.
Yeah.
And if they're, that's definitely what I look for, is if I'm going to have a long-term fish like that, then I want them to have that really good personality, which I've always found with paradise fish for sure. That it's like, oh, these guys are like little, and they're more like if you're a dog person or a cat person. You know what I mean? It's like, do you want the dog to come up to you when you get home? That's me. I want my dogs to be like, hey, buddy. That's why I'm not necessarily a cat person, because cat's just like, I'm off doing whatever I'm doing, and you're like, hey, where's my buddy? Where's my buddy? My buddy doesn't care. Oh.
I do think paradise fish are a notch more aggressive than bettas.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they're definitely harder to be like, just put it in the community aquarium.
They're bigger and badder.
Yeah, they definitely have more muscle to them.
Oh, yeah.
They got more meat on their bones, for sure. And I think we amplify their aggression by keeping them in warmer tanks. So, like, if you put them in a normal community tank, 78 to 80, they're more aggro than chilling at 68 where they want to be.
Right.
So, that's
that's also that, with raising their metabolism, raising their cycle, all that stuff with the heat, with how warm it is, that's also going to make almost anything more aggressive, because you have to think, it's like, well, I'm hungry. It's like when people get hangry, and you're like, you need a sandwich, bro. You're freaking out. That's kind of, I guess I'm going to say metaphor, but that's not right. Analogy, I guess. It's more like an analogy of like
technology.
What it's like when people, when people get hangry, the paradise fish would be the same way, because they're just hungry all the time.
I'm
like,
thinking, because I haven't debuted the wife's new makeover tank yet. You haven't even seen it yet. It's not done yet, but there's about 11 fish in there right now. It's 230 gallons, most of which are silver tip tetras. I was really going to go with a bunch of those in there.
It sounds 10 gallons short.
It's custom, yeah. It is 10 gallons short. It's custom. But I kind of, just talking about this, I really want to be like, man, what if I had white clouds and a breeding pair of paradise fish? Like, what else could I do where people would be like, because I feel like I can't show this stuff unless I do it like in a bigger scale and it looks cool. Like, it's one thing to be like, look, it's a paradise fish, and we're like, yeah. But then, like, if it was in an aquarium that was planted and looked amazing, they're like, what fish is this?
Right.
Why have you never shown me, Corey?
Yeah.
And then you're like, Yeah, it's a paradise fish.
Yeah, 'cause
You know,
you could
like-
sneak up on the aquarium and they'd be like hiding in the bushes.
Yeah.
And then once they realize you're there, then they come out. Like, what's up, buddy?
Because I did
Yeah.
put a heater in 2 days ago, and I'm just like, well, you know, if I'm gonna do this with tropical fish and it's gonna be in the public eye, maybe I should put a heater in here. But the whole time it's like, but for a year I didn't have to have a heater and everything was doing fine, and you know, so maybe I take the heater back out. Maybe I go down that route. We'll have to see where I come down on it, but I just. Well, my brain was thinking, like, I should do that tank out here, but we heat the whole building, and so it wouldn't truly be, like, unheated.
Right.
You know? So.
Well, yeah, because all the tanks here are heated by the big heater.
Yeah.
The big heater.
So we can get into another one of your loves. Well, I think it's one of your loves. Killifish.
Well, we could get into killifish.
Killers? No.
Yes, the murderers.
Killifish.
Right.
I just triggered the internet. You know it's not named Killifish because of that.
That's not what it means. But they are murderers, so
Yeah,
it
exactly.
is apropos.
I know.
Yeah.
It's oh man, the internet. I guarantee 5 people from Europe will be like, "No, it is not killifish. That's not why it's named." I get it. I know. I get it. I know.
They do. They do kill. Though.
They do though.
That's
yeah,
what they
exactly.
do.
They got a giant mouth, and people gotta realize
that is the crazy thing about killifish. It's like, hold on, let me unhinge this thing real quick.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you watch the old, if you watch the old like Goofy. You know, if you watch like old Goofy cartoons, you know, and he makes the giant sandwich, and then he's like, "Well, hold on, let me," you know, and then, like eats the. That's how I put killifish. It's going in there. It's going in.
Well, and that's the thing is, I spent all day long, or at least for the last 10+ years, I spent all day long talking to people that have never heard a Latin name of a fish ever. Like they're just walking in. Yep, me and my kids need some fish. You know, and then the best way to kind of remind them.
I heard
like,
this one was called Nemo.
Yeah, exactly. The best way is like, well, it is called a killifish. Like, they will eat anything that fits in their mouth, and people could identify with that. That's why I use it so much. And, you know, people need to realize with 100,000 people on the channel, yes, there's 1% of you that know the Latin names of all the killifish, their collection points, the Latin names, where it came from. And then there's the other 99%. They're like, oh, in my mind, now I'll remember that killifish typically swallow stuff because it's a killifish.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of remaining
It's a
like,
nice
well,
way
they
to
come
correlate.
from little, you know, ponds and ditches and blah, blah, blah. Like, you remember like, oh, yeah, the swallowing part. I remember that. So.
Well, yeah, it's a nice way to just kind of relate to people like, hey,
Yeah.
this thing's going to eat stuff because they come from a very hard...
Because killifish.
Well, they come from a real gangster environment, realistically. When you get down to it, it's like...
Eat or be eaten.
You got a fish that's able to live where the water goes away? Like, what are you talking about?
The water gets smaller and
yeah.
smaller and just has to eat bigger and bigger prey until it starves? All right.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the really cool things about killifish is that I forget the scientific term for it, which is terrible, but essentially when they lay their eggs on stuff, their eggs can exist dry.
Oh, yeah. I don't...
Yeah. And I can't remember the scientific term
My brain wants
for
to
it.
say, like, parthenogenesis, but I think that's self-cloning.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right one.
It's just one of those times I sat in
just sounded
traffic too
cool.
long today, so I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at on the cusp remembering things anyhow, right?
Yeah.
But one of the really cool things about them is that, you know, that because they come from that environment, their eggs are able to exist. And I've actually run into this like accidentally in my fish keeping career.
Would you have, like, a bucket of, like, I'm going to dry this moss over here?
I had a bucket of driftwood,
Yeah.
right? Because as you've been to my place, I have these totes that are just full of like old driftwood and things that are ongoing projects or whatever. Well, I'd taken down this tank, so I had clown killies. So if you want a little less violent fish,
Annulatus killifish. They're
Yeah.
super rad, by the way.
so the clown killies are a little less violent,
Or
mainly
the
because they're
rocket
small.
killie, also known by that.
Yeah.
And they're small. Nanofish.
They're nanofish. They're real little guys. Brilliant blue eye,
Mm-hmm.
stripy white and black body, very.
With a rocket tail that... I mean, there's nothing not to love about these things except for they jump out every 4
Except
seconds.
they jump out of your tank,
Yeah.
you know. And I think, Corey and I were talking about this at one point in time because I had nine tanks set up all in a
Yeah.
row, and one of them had clown killies in it, and eventually every single tank had clown killies in it, all the way down to the end, and back and forth, which was kind of funny. But the real crazy story so I had taken down a couple of those tanks, right? And apparently they had spawned on something, because I'd taken out some driftwood, had been sitting in the totes and stuff for like 6 months, you know what I mean, like a long amount of time, and to the point where I went, I didn't even have the clown killies anymore. I had sold them off and moved on to do something else.
Yeah.
And so it'd been sitting so long, I hadn't even thought about clown killies. That's how long it had been. And I ended up setting up that driftwood in a scape that I was doing.
Yeah.
And about 2 months later, I'm like, what are these little fish in here? What are these little clown killies? What's going on? Why do I have little clown? They'd apparently spawned, and I'd taken the stuff out, which, of course, I wasn't looking for eggs or anything like that, which good
is
luck
kind of
seeing
cool,
them anyhow.
You can just buy killifish eggs like on eBay and Aquabid of like, we're just going to send you some eggs.
So that,
good luck raising them.
That's one of the really
you
cool
have
things.
Some skills a little bit.
Yeah, is that you could, you can actually just order the eggs and have them sent to you, which is super cool if you can get that.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different killies. Some get huge, like blue gularis. There's also other killies that are like stupid big, like 6-10 inches, eat everything, brown and ugly. But for the most part, super colorful, pretty adaptive. I would say, with a generalization here, best not kept with other fish.
Best not kept with other fish.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do it and pull it off, and there's ways.
It's
but
doable.
If I'm going to really overgeneralize, just say, like, there's a reason why killifish keepers have 172 tanks in their closet, and it's because they don't need much space, and they don't really like being with other fish.
They don't.
And
they
food
they
requirements,
don't.
it can be finicky sometimes, some of the species for sure.
I have 3 pair in a 240-gallon aquarium, and it's really not big enough for the other fish in there.
Yeah.
They're tormented. The other fish are tormented in a 240-gallon aquarium by 6 little killifish. 3 males, 3 females. Mm-hmm. And so on a personal note, some people out there might be excited by this, but we'll be actually setting up a new tank for the little killie sanctuary, so that they can go over there and I can move on with the 240. Continually working on the 240 forever. Yeah, enhancing. Like 34 left, enhance.
Yep. My favorite unheated fish at the moment, and I think it's going to be my rock star for quite a while because they're really doing well, even right now outside, which it's cold, it's rainy, is the Japanese rice fish.
Didn't even cross my mind, and I looked at them yesterday.
Yeah. But because they're right next to my door, and every day I'm like, look at them. They're looking for food. They're still making babies.
Now
it's freezing.
Now I know why in the pre-show you didn't want to bring it up, because
I knew you would steal that idea.
You wanted this moment captured in time.
I wanted to, my goal.
Like, oh man, I walked right past them.
Yeah. But I really do like the rice fish. Mostly my favorite ones that have won out so far. So I got like the platinums, the oranges, some other crazy colored one. Like these ones are sky something, like some dumb made up name. But so far the oranges, just straight up, they look good. The platinums, they look okay, but I'm not sure that like the platinum is that much cooler than a gold white cloud. Like they're different colors, but somehow that orange looks like a tropical fish. And white clouds, like gold white clouds, to me they still look subtropical, I guess. I don't know. But the oranges have won out. They're my ooh, that's awesome. And they're still breeding. They're doing well. And I hope to carry them over winter.
And see how they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and see what happens.
I mean, I'll probably try putting like a cover over it or something like that, just to keep the chill off a little bit.
Right.
I think they'll do it, but I really need to. The problem is we're redoing the studio here, and I don't have any space. But I need to bring some of them in case I do freeze them, because they're really hard to get a hold of.
It's probably a good idea to at least.
I know, but
bring in a small amount.
Like
of
we
them
need
or
to tear
something.
down 30 aquariums, and I'm supposed to bring those in somewhere. Like I need to rehome
Looking
30
for space
aquariums
is
of
gonna
fish.
be-
Yeah, that makes it 32, really.
We might have to get you a horse trough heater.
We could. That's just, I don't want to. I don't want to jeopardize learning whether they can overwinter here or not. Like that's my main objective.
Yeah, but how many? I guess how many tubs out there of there do you have them, or are they just in
They're
one?
just in one.
Oh.
The platinums are in a different one.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I have
you
two
got orange
species
in
out
one,
there.
and then the
And
platinum.
then I do have that other sky whatever type of thing. It's still in the fish room.
Okay. Okay.
So I mean, it wouldn't be like, oh my god, you've lost every rice fish ever. It would just be, oh man, I lost all the ones I like.
Right. Yeah.
So even just saying that out loud,
If
it
only we
means
knew somebody.
I should take those.
If
ones.
only we knew a guy that had a bunch of fish tanks somewhere.
Yeah, or a store.
Or a
Or-
store.
Yeah, I know.
Well, if we knew somebody, just some guy, I don't know.
Yeah. So someone's asking if you live in Oregon, it's like a little bit warmer than Washington. Could I keep Japanese rice fish outside in a smallish tank? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to find out. Like
Yeah.
right now, I'm trying in a 100-gallon trough, but I'm kind of the guinea pig of like, let's see if Corey watches. At this point, a couple $100 worth of fish freeze to death. Because when I bought them, they were like $60 worth or something. You know, like.
And now they're breeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be like, oh, that didn't work, but I'm the guinea pig for you guys, and if it totally works, like next summer, we're all gonna want them because we're like, oh man. And I mean, I don't know if it's gonna happen in Wisconsin, Oregon. I would say so. The reason I'm trying is that in Japan they breed them outside year round,
Right.
and we have very similar climates. So that's why I think like, so if they're breeding out there year round, usually a fish will stop breeding before it gets too cold. So like when they stop breeding, that's a sign
Right.
like you're getting towards their I'm just trying to stay alive phase.
Right. Right.
So
It's pretty typical, but oh, yeah, yes, that's typical.
mm-hmm.
And then also, I think, I guess to generalize, that's kind of a good point to bring up. That like with some fish like that are essentially the seasonal ones that aren't from the equator. It's like,
Yeah.
well, they breed when it starts to warm up. It's like, oh, there'll be more food available and this and that. Whereas which in my opinion makes it a little bit easier for breeding projects and stuff like that. Those types of fish I find easier to breed because it's like stimulating their ability to breed is or their not their ability to breed, but their okay, it's time to breed. They're wanting to and that kind of stuff is
well, that's a point.
is really beneficial in my experience because it's like, oh, you can get these guys to breed every 3 months, or whatever, because you're just running this temperature variation to make them think, oh, now it's springtime again. And you're like, yeah.
Well, and that's what I liked about the natural unheated aquarium kind of that I was doing is that you would get those swings, and like half the reason people are like, wait, you weren't heating the angelfish? Like, no, and they were so docile. Like, if you keep them at 80, they're in breeding mode all the time, and they're kind of fighty and, like, oh, good, let's get out of here. I got to breed. This is my woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you keep them colder, they're like, oh, yeah, it's the off season. We're here to eat and to survive and swim around. I'm not keeping them so cold where they're like, I'm here just not to die today, but it's in that range. And that's, I think, I've brought this up quite a few times, but when we go and collect, so like for instance, I'm going to go to Peru and collect fish. When I go there, one of the logical things to do would be like, I wonder how warm this water is. I wonder what the pH is. I wonder what all these things are, right? But we pretty much only ever go collect fish when the season is right. So like, let's go when it's warm, because if it's super cold, that could be lame, right? So we go and, you go and you collect and you're like, yeah, the water was 81 degrees. And then in the winter, you're going, oh, it was 65 degrees.
Right.
But in our minds, we're going, yeah, but angelfish, they only want 81 degrees. And like, no, they can handle that spread. And it's really apparent in some things like Gary Lang, I believe, was telling me, or I don't know if it was Gary Lang or if I just read it, so I don't want to put words in his mouth. But a lot of the pseudomogil rainbows go down to like 50s in the winter outside, like in nature. Like, it's warm, but then it really drops down in those rivers that they come from.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It's like I make that face like, that's surprising, but it's really not. You're like, okay, yeah, actually,
Yeah, when
that
you
makes
think
sense,
about
you
like
know? Yeah.
climate, yeah, if it was at 90 and then in the coldest of winter it's 50.
No one has a thermostat out there. You know
Right.
what I mean?
People, I mean, and that was the case. Is like this guy was like, crazy rainbow fish nerd that like wanted to check in on it year round, and that's how they found that. Unless someone's doing that, we're just getting snippets of like, oh well, yeah, the good times to collect in the middle of summer because it's warm,
Right.
And that would be, think of where you live right now, and when would you want to go collect fish? The middle of summer, and then you go, yeah, water temp was way warmer, but right now those fish are still alive where you live, and it's way colder.
Right.
So clearly, the fish can live in that range.
I think a perfect like parallel to that would be: do we have any fishermen out there? Do we have any fishermen watching the show? I almost guarantee you we do. So, when do you go fishing? When they're running,
right?
When they're running and active, and you go, there's a much higher. There's a much higher population of these fish right now in the river. That's when I'm going to go get steelhead, right?
Yep.
It's like time to go salmon fishing. It's like, well, this isn't what they normally do. So if you were to just take the water readings from that time of year and go, well, that's what it's supposed to be like all year round, you can end up having a problem. So yeah, I think maybe that's like an easy way to relate it. It's like when you go fishing is when they're running. When you go scooping with a net to catch the live ones is when they're running around doing their breeding and stuff.
The other thing, like with an unheated aquarium, there are some extra, I don't want to call them dangers, but other things to think about. So we just talked about how they'll breed at different temperatures. All right, we're cool with that. But they also eat at different temperatures. So like if I'm keeping them crispy hot, they want tacos nonstop. But if they're cold, they're gonna eat. Like I just need a little bit of warm soup to warm me up, please. Even though they're all cold blooded, but you know what I mean. And we do that all the time. Actually, we just don't think about it that way because we tend to keep things differently. Like for whatever reason, the pond world is way different than the aquarium world, and we don't really mesh too well. Like a lot of aquarium people have some ponds, but hardcore pond people usually don't have that many aquariums. Like they're like a different breed. It's like they're almost like, oh, but it's very well known in the koi world. Like below this water temp, we're gonna feed wheat germ. Below that water temp, we might not feed at all. Above this is where we're gonna try to put weight on the fish. This is when they're gonna breed. And it's because they're all so many people are focusing on one specific fish, whereas you take the aquarium hobby and it's like, oh well, there's 20,000 different species we're all playing with, and
Right.
And like no one ever dialed it in.
It's like I've got rams and altums and
Some of that stuff is common, but no one's comparing notes right now on like the clouded archer fish that is true freshwater.
Right.
X amount of people have them, but no one's really going, let's see how cold they can go. Let's see how hot they can go.
Like all year round, the ongoing experiment.
Right. Yeah. I'm everyone. I won't say everyone, but most people will be like me. Like, well, from my experience of them living in that 800 gallon, they seem to do okay at the temperatures they've been at. I'm not like, oh, let's see what the thresholds are. Let's see, because I've got nothing to gain from that. Like, oh, I killed half of them, but I learned under 62 is a death sentence. But then it's like, oh, well, no one was going to keep them under 62 anyway. Like,
right.
Oh, I learned knowledge that we didn't really need to know, I guess.
Didn't need to come up with it. So, well, yeah, and I believe that, I guess just on that little pond tangent, because oftentimes ponds aren't heated and stuff like that, so I think that, does it count as an aquarium? I don't know, but it's a man-made, man-kept.
Yeah, it's a body of water that keeps fish.
It's a big in-ground aquarium, right? Is that... What I've noticed is that a lot of people that keep ponds are closer to the agricultural side than per se the aquarium hobby side. So it's like, whereas somebody in an aquarium hobby would go, all right, I want to keep a bunch of fish and I want to do this, and then you get multiple tank syndrome because you're like, well, I need to add more tanks now because I need to, I need to figure out. I got to figure out that. I got to figure out this wood, and I got to figure out these rocks, and I got to figure and that's just kind of the natural progression. Whereas the pond guys, they go, well, once it's growing and stuff, and an established system in doing that, they kind of go, well, what goes next to the pond? Okay, a goat. I don't know. Some
Right.
chickens. Well,
The
maybe
Japanese maple, the
yeah,
blah,
maybe
blah, blah.
yeah. So you
yeah.
definitely get into the more agricultural stuff, and oftentimes I will say that whenever you, not whenever, I don't want to put blanket statements on stuff, but typically when you go to like a pond supply store and stuff like that, you almost find fencing and chicken feed and a lot of agricultural type stuff when you go to a pond supply store if you're trying to find that kind of thing. So that's probably the bit of the parallel, and that honestly is one of my big goals, is to start combining all of this stuff into what and as I've talked in the past, is it would be difficult for me to say like, oh, this is what the British people should be doing. It's not exclusive to the United States, but this is where my experience is. So trying to spread, bring agriculture and your aquariums, because your aquariums can definitely be in your house, right? And then your ponds, your unheated stuff that's outside and all that
They could be in your house too, technically.
Well, it could be in your house, yes. But it could also be an extension of your outdoor space that you're living in, and what are you gonna sort of produce and stuff like that. Like you've been in my house where it's like, well, we've got our little chicken yard, we've got our garden, all that kind of stuff. All the ponds are all going to be getting included within that system. And my initial thought was like, I'm probably gonna heat it, but I'm more along the lines now of going like, I'm not gonna heat it. It's just a huge
just find a way to make it work.
It's a huge waste of my time, realistically, to heat it, because the more and more research I did, it's like, well, why waste the electricity? I can just bring my warm buddies inside, and they can come hang out in there.
So this person asked, don't you think the koi argument really boils down to the fact that they originally bred outdoors, where they were figured out all of that before they became common? No, I don't, actually. I think most of the pioneering has gone on in the last 30 years, just because, like, for instance, roseline sharks, or Denshin barbs, are now bred in captivity as well, but they're bred in such a warm climate that it doesn't apply to our aquarium. Same thing with a lot of the koi and goldfish we buy. A fair portion are made in Hawaii. Way different climate than we're ever going to keep them here in the United States or in a different country. Same thing with, koi being raised in Israel versus Russia versus, like, there's... Just because, we do some things. And the other thing is, we can adapt strains. So you can it used to be that guppies lived in unheated aquariums and never had a problem ever through the 60s and 70s. And, in the beginning of the 80s. Now, you take a fancy guppy and you put it in anything less than like 72 and it starts falling apart. Because it hasn't been raised and bred for so long to be hardy, temperature hardy. That's not been the focus. The focus has been, we've changed the focus into, let's produce colors, not hardy fish. And the same thing is happening in the koi world and all worlds. So now it's like, well, we need to make these color patterns because that's what makes money. Not so much, like, everyone focuses on like, Omasako has the best Shirowatsuri lines. They're not focusing on, they have the hardiest. They're focusing on they have the best looking to win the competition.
Right.
And so we're focusing on different things than we used to, that type of thing. So I don't necessarily agree with the only reason we know that about koi is because they're always bred outdoors. The reality is a lot of them are bred outdoors, but a lot of them are actually bred indoors as well and raised indoors. And
well, the unfortunate side is that with, the way that genetics work is that when you are breeding for hardiness, right? The unfortunate side is that you end up with a lot of death. Because those that aren't genetically strong enough to handle these more extreme situations, they just end up dying. I do know, I think about 7 years ago, here's a little thing that happened. It was big news at the time. The monarch butterflies, right? They migrate south, and it's weird. They migrate like birds. It gets cold out. They don't like it. They head south. They head down to Mexico. Well, there's certain places in Mexico you can go to, and there's just like, when they show up, it's like they're everywhere. And at the time, which is very odd, it was snowing in Mexico That's how cold it was where the monarchs had gone to.
Yeah.
And they thought, oh, wow, the monarch butterflies are all going to be gone. They're all going to be dead because, look, they're dying, they're freezing, they're doing this, they're doing that. And as a matter of fact, yes, there was a large die-off, and which is very unfortunate because you're like, well, I want more monarch butterflies. They're super pretty. I love them being around. And you go, well, I don't want them to die. Well, the ones that died don't pass on their genetics to the next butterflies that are going to come next year. And guess what? Those genetics that get passed on, they're much more hardy. They're hardier, and they can survive in the cold.
It's almost like a filtering.
Yeah, so it's that's the thing. And then, as hobbyists, if we're aquaculturing and stuff, when our plants die, or when our fish die off from the breeding, we consider that a failure because we go, oh, I'm losing money if I'm breeding for profit, or I'm losing my buddies if I'm breeding for fun, and that kind of stuff. So, and I wouldn't say that I've really gotten any backlash from this. I've more or less just gotten ambivalent. Like, people just kind of go like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Is that, in my breeding process, I more often than not allow it to be kind of a dangerous environment for them. Like, a bunch of them aren't going to make it. If I have something that breeds 100 babies, right? Like, I realistically only want 3 to 5 of those to make it, because that's kind of how it works in nature. It's like, if you have 2 fish breeding, you're probably from that spawn going to end up with between 3 and 5 actually growing to become actual fish. So I do make it a little bit. It's a little highway to the danger zone up in my breeding situation.
Up in my crib.
But I do feel like that's beneficial as moving forward. That if I do pass on fish that I raise, they're going to be a hardier fish.
I mean, that's why the terms like buy from a local breeder and that type of thing exist. It's not going into this depth, but I've got a lot of projects outside right now that are gonna die, and a lot of people are like, that is horrible. And I'm like, in a vacuum, yes, what I just said is horrible, but there's trout Goodeids, there's two different rice fish strains out there, there's some fancy guppies, there's white clouds, I don't think the Florida flagfish are still out there. I think they got raccooned. But so there's all these things out there, and some of them are gonna die. But what comes out on the other side next winter, let's say I lose all the fancy guppies. Like, dang it, couldn't take them cold enough. But let's say I lose half the trout Goodeids, I lose 1/3 of the rice fish, and none of the white clouds. Now, all those fish have been through at least one winter here, and what grows and spawns next year is that much more battle hardened for the following year. I would wager I'd lose almost nothing that following year, barring a crazy extreme winter compared to this one. And then after that, when you're selling them and you're giving them to friends and that kind of stuff, you can say like, hey, you can keep these outside year round. And that is my goal. My goal is I want some ponds that actually stay out year round, that aren't just goldfish or channel catfish or kind of the standard things. And I've done it before, but you have to invest some of that. That's not very fun time, there's some dead fish. Like, yep, there are some.
That's pretty.
That's the only way to get there. And it used to be in when guppies had names. So when it's like, oh, that's a Stan Schubel. Oh, that's like when the breeder's name was attached to the guppy. It used to be their reputation was on the line. So they would make a new color strain, but then they would give it ick and not treat it. And whatever survived that, then they breed that up. And then they would go, okay, let's do velvet. Now let's do cold temperatures. Now, and by the time you get done, that's why it took 7 to 10 years to make these.
Right.
When it went to market, man, that Stan Schubel guppy, bulletproof.
Right.
Like, nothing takes that thing down. Never has a bacterial infection. Never has ick. Doesn't need a heater. My grandkids love it. And, every store wants to buy them. And they're super hardy. And they've got all these great qualities. But now we've just been focusing so much, like, every year. And, hey, I'm guilty of it. Like, look at that new one I don't have yet. So all the money is in, look at that new one I don't have yet, not look at how strong that one is. But I do try to do my own fancy guppies where I just colony breed, let those genetics do whatever they want, let the weak get out of there. And I do go after some of the heirloom strains, like I was lucky to get the German Berlin Buttercup here, which that's an older strain. Not the most gorgeous strain that we can make currently, but it should be very hardy, and it's a cool color yellow. But those are some of the things to think about, I think, if you are a breeder and you're doing some of those unheated things. Like, realize you do have a marketable thing. You know, like if you had clown loaches all of a sudden that could live outside year round, that fish is way different than the ones living in my aquarium right now.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and I don't know that you could necessarily do it, but you might go, well, these ones can at least live down in the 40s. Like, that's a way different fish, you know? So
that definitely ends up, especially genetically speaking, it ends up being a way different fish realistically when you get down to it.
Yeah, and you know, you might find that it it does really well or really poor with those fish at those water temperatures and all that kind of thing, but it is different for sure. And that's just, I guess, you know, if you've been doing fish a really long time, that's my latest goal. My latest goal isn't like, man, can I do that plant a tank? Can I inject CO2? Can I grow that plant? I've done all that stuff like a million times. So it's like, I wonder if I could make this fish make it through the winter. You know, like that's an unknown for me. So I guess in the hobby, it's a progression of unknowns. That's why you end up with multiple tanks. Like, I haven't done that before. And that's how I end up with ponds of stuff. You're like, well, some of that stuff might die. Yep. But at the same time, I spent all summer making a ton of them. So it's not like, you know, they wouldn't have existed unless I made them. I'm not looking to kill them, but I am looking to improve them. So I mean, I definitely know it's a moral tightrope. I feel guilty and yet not guilty, because it's like,
yeah, I mean, you are falling into is it moral or not?
I think it's one of those things, if you're successful, it's totally moral. If you're not, it's not. So, like, imagine this.
But I honestly don't think that it's necessarily a morality issue, in the fact that, like, maybe we feel like it's morality, but it's really not, when you're allowing the animals to do what the animals are supposed to do.
Right.
So
well, I look at it like, let's look at guppies. A lot of them just die to small aquariums that are underkept, that maybe never get a heater. Right? That's just going to happen day in, day out. People don't do that. Like, go work at a pet store. Happens every day.
Yeah.
I put them in the 1 gallon. They didn't live. Who knew? But imagine you could take just assorted fancy guppies, and they overwinter, and they're used to some things. And then now they're living, and the kids aren't killing them. So while I might have killed 500 of them to get them to a point where they live, now kids aren't killing them, so maybe we're saving thousands and thousands of their lives, that type of thing. So NY Gold says, hey Corey, look, I'm trying to be a comedian. All right, got that.
All right.
Yeah. Let's see here. Will this be on the podcast? Jay asked. Definitely will. I'll be uploading it later today. Normally it's fairly soon after, but we have a bunch of episodes to film because I'll be out of town. Next week, for instance, there will not be a live one because I won't be around. I mean, you could do one solo, I suppose, but you know, there's nothing scheduled.
I could do a
officially.
solo one, but Jimmy would have to drive to my house.
So you won't drive up here for Jimmy?
No, he'll have to come down.
Yeah, you guys could do one. Maybe if Wirecast, there's a new update for Wirecast, by the way. We're hoping it solves the debacles. Like, that's why he's here, right? So a 3-hour drive so that we didn't have to use Google Hangout technology, which is just, it's suboptimal.
And it's realistically, like, if we're gonna do a bunch of recordings, a bunch of stuff, and then encounter a bunch of problems, it's like, you know, hit the nail on the head. Just come up here and get it done ahead of time.
Just drive 3 hours. It's easier that way.
Plus, we had it scheduled, so it wasn't like, you know, it could have been like, never mind. But it's like, what else was I gonna do? It was already scheduled. So I was written in on the thing. So it's like, I would have just been wandering around my house, like, you know, hey, there's like I could play some tiddlywinks or something by myself. I don't know. Hey, what are you doing, dogs? You know.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we are wrapping up here. We're about the 1 hour mark. About I say we've got a little bit more to go.
I didn't know when we started. When did we start?
About 1 hour ago.
It was a weird time.
Yeah, if you look at the time. Well, about 11:18, I think, or 11:19 we started.
All right.
No, that's a lie, because that's what time it is now. 10:18.
10:19.
10:19. We were a little bit late. But if you'd like to support us, which you guys have, you can use the podcast 10 discount code on aquariumcoop.com. Gets you 10% off, puts 5% towards the show. We've been investing. You better believe that. You can donate through Patreon. The links have been in the chat. But if you're listening to this, you can go to Patreon, Joel_C, and that will get you into his. And then /Aquarium Co-op is us. You can kick in $1 and $1 a month. If a bunch of people do that, that pays for 3 hours of sitting in traffic.
It's huge.
It's just
Right.
gas and, gas, coffee. Covering at least that will help. Like, it's one of those things like, I spent $60 to sit in traffic for 3 hours, and I haven't eaten breakfast yet. I
haven't eaten breakfast
I had
yet
a
either.
cupcake so far.
Yeah.
And some milk.
Somebody have a donut?
Yeah. So, we're not, and people get a little weird about this.
There's chips here, but I can't eat it. Chips.
You could eat those.
I can't eat those into the mic.
Oh, yeah. You don't do that. It's not one of those things like, look, I'm not going to say this show's going to go away if it doesn't get supported, but there definitely are priorities of time. And so it might be like, yeah, we go back to just doing one show on a Saturday. That's it. That's all we do. And it's just my little show or something like that. But the goal is to actually make this to be something bigger. We need more microphones for more guests. We need more technologies. I've got a second internet connection coming. This is no joke, I've invested $600 just in router equipment in the last 3 days.
It's brutal.
Purely for live streaming. It's not for anything else. Like, yeah, I do some other live streams on my channel, but literally that money has been spent only for that. So that just, I'm not guilt tripping. I'm just saying, putting in perspective, like, we're trying really hard to iron out every kink to bring you guys something that hopefully gets you through your workday $1 easier a month.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty low, I feel like that's a pretty low ask. Or
That's a low threshold to get in.
yeah.
You try to get Netflix and
Ooh,
they're
let's do the math. Hold on. At two podcast episodes a week, that's 8 at $1. Is that 12 cents?
8.
Because it'd be 2 every week. There's 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's like 12.5 cents.
12.5 cents is the commitment we ask. And
Per show.
people do get a little uppity about the Patreon. Here's the reason I started the Patreon. True talk right here. One, I want to support other creators besides myself. Because I have a business. It does make money. And eventually it would make enough money to buy this equipment, that type of stuff. But you do not have a business. Most other YouTube creators don't have a business. So it's literally just always out of pocket until YouTube cuts you your $27 check. And, if you're not, closing in on 100,000 subscribers, wherever that right there is, you're not making very much money at all. And the threshold is very high. So, like, if you don't put a bunch of money in, unfortunately, you're not going to get much traction on YouTube. And I want to see more YouTubers. So that was the original intention. And that's why I've kept it to, it's just $1. There's no rewards on mine or anything like that. I don't want to, steal the money like Corey's getting $5,000 because he's giving all these rewards and no other YouTuber is getting it. I want it. And the biggest goal is to get you guys to sign up for an account. And then once you do that, you might go, hey, I want to support Corey, but then also, Jim2296. He does a rad show and he gets $1. That type of thing.
And that's one of my things too. Is that was one of the reasons that I started doing the Patreon a while back, and the reason for doing it is to also help grow the community, like get more people involved. Like, if maybe there's a YouTube contributor out there or podcast contributor or something that only makes a show like once a month because that's all the time that they got because they're out cutting down the wheat or whatever they're doing to make their bills met, and the buy-in is pretty low. The threshold to buy-in is pretty darn low. I'm supporting a few people and it's $14 a month. And you're like, yeah, to me that's worth it. Try and motivate a couple of other people to help them out, and then go, I'm trying to think of one of the. Sadly enough, I'm trying to think of some of the people that I support. But for instance, if somebody is like, well, I've never been able to afford that good microphone, and you're like, I hate your audio, but here's $2 a month, and hopefully some other people will kick in $2 a month or whatever. And then before you know it, a couple months go by, and it's like, oh, hey, I got the new mic, guys. So That's the kind of stuff that I look forward to. And crowdsourcing it is what makes it super easy for that threshold and stuff. So
Tom Gregory asks, will we fly him out from New Zealand to our show? If there's a bunch of money sitting around for a fund like that, sure. I think it's much more likely that I'll be in New Zealand in the next year.
Right.
Like, I think that is a way more likely scenario. But, Kyle says, found Diana Wallstad book on Amazon. Do you link it from your site? I personally don't. No.
I do from my YouTube page. It's more often than not in the description.
Yeah.
Down below. I definitely link Diana's book. I think, I guess just on a light conversational thing, I think a lot of people took some of her studies out there and kind of maybe pat themselves on the back for her work or whatever, however you want to put it. But she's really the forefront, she's really at the forefront of the science behind, planted aquariums. I can't think of anybody.
I feel like she's published the most and is just known to be working on it.
Yeah.
There could be someone else who's like, oh no, I got the raddest book ever coming out, but it's not out yet, and it's not in our wheelhouse of like, hey, go read this one. So It's just, that's the best.
Well, it's one of those things that I go, somebody said, well, why do you think she's more experienced than you? I'm like, she's been working on it since I think before I was born, so she just has to be more experienced than me, right? Or than anybody I've necessarily seen out there. But I do link that one. I do link her book. That's the one book I link as far as any kind of periodical out there that people look at, I think people should look into.
So the other reason I started the Patreon was because there was a lot of people around the world asking or saying, I would love to support you, but I can't buy from your store. And so Patreon goes worldwide. You can kick in $1. It's all cool. And I know what it's like when you want to help and then you can't. It's discouraging. So that's the other reason. So I linked a couple of shrimp posters or a couple of posters from Amazon. Literally, it was a simple Google thing. I typed in shrimp poster and there's 2 right there. And I know these are the ones that are always there. And right now I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I count 9 posters just by typing in shrimp poster. So, it's one of those things that when people are like, I looked, and I don't know what to tell you other than like, yep, I found it live in 11 seconds. Yeah. So it's one of those things. Dig around a little bit, work on your Google fooing, Amazon fooing, and maybe fish poster doesn't work because maybe it's all fishing people. But shrimp poster totally worked, and there's a bunch of them. And I know I myself have bought an insane amount of posters between Aquabid, Amazon, and eBay. It's going to take you a little bit of work. There's not like, the Aquarium Poster Depot or anything because there's no money to be made in posters. Mm-hmm. So that's just the way it goes. River Life is 26 away from 10,000 subscribers. Nice work. You've been putting some work in to get to 10K.
Who?
River Life.
I'm at 10K? What?
No, River Life is almost at
River
10K.
Life 26 away from 10,000. On this channel.
True?
On Jimmy's.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was like, man, because last time I looked, I thought you were like, I don't even know, like 1,000 or something. Like, dang, how'd you do $9,000 in like since I met you or since I saw you in Chicago type of deal?
So I've always been hovering around 5 and 6 is where I've always been.
Yeah. So
that's my wheelhouse, just right in there.
Yeah. All right. Well, throw us a like. Do us a favor. Subscribe on the podcast. Ooh, by the way, on the podcast front, I got confirmation email. I didn't get to check it before we went live. But confirmation through email that iHeartRadio is now taking our money, and it should be searchable on iHeartRadio within the next 72 hours.
Oh, cool. Fantastic.
Yeah. Right? So it's like, we've taken your money, we have approved your content, and then maybe in 72 hours someone will be able to search it. So hopefully the people that were asking for iHeartRadio, which might only be 2 of you, it might be 2,000 of you, I have no idea, but there was at least 2 of you vocal. And for, $20 or $30 a month, we can supply that to you, which, just comes out of a little podcast arena budget.
That's right.
So we're going to close this one down, take a break to do our jumping jacks, and then we're going to film some more episodes and get those uploaded and scheduled out so that you guys won't miss us while I'm out of town. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Give us more topic suggestions. You know, we're not always going to do every suggestion, but it does help. This one was someone asking a question, why don't you do? And I was like, well, I did do it, but it was a year ago or longer, so we'll do it again. And I think we have definitely a new, a new perspective, especially with a co-host. It definitely changes. If it's a monologue, I got one set of thing I'm saying, and then I can always play off of this guy. You know, I just try to make him look bad.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
It's not hard to make me look bad, right?
No, yeah, it's really not.
Trickery.
It's actually really hard to make you look good. That's the hard part.
That's the hard part.
Yeah,
that's the tricky.
Totally joking. Obviously, it might not come. You might not see our facial expressions on podcast form, so realize all in good fun here. This is definitely nothing like that. I'm not being hard, or he's not being hard on me, anything like that. We're a couple of guys that like to joke around, and been spending a lot of time together the past couple of weeks, so it's only gonna get more jokesy and jokesy. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. See you next time. Have a good day at work, or your workout, or your aquarium cleaning, or your farming, or your the next one. I want someone to tell me how they listened to this podcast while they were at like the skate deck, the roller rink.
Ooh, the roller rink.
Yeah,
nice.
1 hour of just flowing and listening.
just flowing.
You're flowing.
Flowing at the rink.
Yep.
Nice.